Good evening, everybody. I'm Clint Richmond from the Massachusetts Sierra Club. Um, I'd like to welcome everybody here for joining us this evening. Um, the topic of our webinar tonight is avoiding PFAS through purchasing policies. I want to thank my colleague Celeste for helping run the meeting, and our guests tonight, who you'll see their names on the slide. Um, we're going to take questions at the end. Feel free to drop them in the chat. If they're clarifying, well, we may try and answer them live, but otherwise we'll be waiting to the end. We are going to leave time for questions for sure. And we do want to try and end promptly at 8. Um, so with that, I guess we can go to the next slide. I'm trying to think. So, as I said, I'm the conservation chair for the Massachusetts Sierra Club. I'm a former um, member of our board. I also serve on the national toxics team and the national PFAS team for the Sierra Club. This program is a nationwide audience. That's why we're having it at 7:30, so we can accommodate people from the West Coast. But we will be talking about Massachusetts in some detail, but it's all applicable to the whole country. Okay, so keep going. Sorry, we're back on here. So for those of you who remember your introductory economics, there's sort of the supply side and the demand side. And most often action is taken at the supply side with product bans or restrictions on manufacturers or suppliers. This often requires legislative approval or some sort of regulatory, hearing and approval process by some regulatory agency. Those are very time consuming, very powerful. But they do immediately have an impact on well, not immediately, depends on when they go into effect. Sometimes it's years in the future, um, on the products that are on the market. And the goal here is for those in particular, well, actually for both of them, the supply and demand side, is to get manufacturers to reformulate their products to avoid toxic materials and for suppliers to make them available. But you can also act on the market for goods on the demand side by customers stepping up and saying, to go beyond what is regulated and to talk about your own preferences in terms of as a consumer. So this goes beyond individual consumer purchasing, which is important, but we're talking about organizational policies. Next slide, please. So environmental purchasing policies may do a number of things, such as prioritize products that conserve water or energy or don't contain heavy metals like cadmium or lead. But in this case, we're going to talk about synthetic chemicals, by and large, that are chemicals, what they call chemicals of concern. So the first and the one that we're going to focus on in particular tonight are PFAS, which is a large class of 15,000 chemicals, sometimes called the forever chemicals, which have lots of complicated chemistry. The example here, and this one is in the upper left of the diagrams. And then flame retardants, antimicrobials, which are used in cleaning products and sterilization, additives, phthalates, and bisphenols. Polyvinyl chloride, PVC, is an individual plastic. That's the sort of the pleather smell in new cars and so forth. And then fly ash, which is the solid remainder from incineration, which can contain, again, like heavy metals or everything that was in the incinerator that didn't burn. Uh, Next slide, please. So here are some notable organizations that have adopted environmental purchasing policies. San Francisco did theirs as an ordinance, a city ordinance. So that's a law. Massachusetts did it in 2009 as an executive order that could be overturned by the next administration or by the executive, at their whim. Michigan followed that up. They're a state that's been impacted by PFAS. The federal government has had a federal sustainability plan for a while, including they focused on custodial products at one point. But they could also be done by progressive private and corporate buyers who want to protect human health and the environment as well. So we've got Harvard, which is a nonprofit, and the others are well-known corporate names. And together, those organizations with San Francisco are also a member of a group called the Material Buyers Club, which is organized by an NGO to share expertise and information in terms of leveraging their market power. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a mature environmental purchasing policy in operation where you have sort of this point and click where you can say, oh, I'm going to be buying a new office chair or 10 office chairs, and I want to pick one that reduces toxic materials. You could click on that checkbox and then ideally order that and away you go. So you don't have to do any research because otherwise you have to do all the research yourself. But you'll notice there's a lot of, in this case, office furniture, and there's, I guess, some insulation there too. So it could be a range of materials. But next slide, please. So, inspired by these other organizations, um, some Massachusetts municipalities have passed a local, these are resolutions, not legally binding regulations. So the bar is pretty low to get these passed. All of these have been passed without really any opposition. Brookline did theirs at Brookline Town Meeting in November of 2023. I was one of the co-petitioners on that, and it focused on PFAS. Um, and I should mention organofluorines for the chemistry geeks in the audience. Organofluorines are chemicals that have carbon-fluorine bonds, and PFAS are a large subset of that. As I said, 15,000, but there are other materials, other substances, synthetic substances, petrochemicals that also have fluorine and share many of the same hazards. This was followed pretty quickly in Newton and then also Middleborough. The Sierra Club of Massachusetts began to campaign to get municipalities to do this. So we assisted in, I think, both of those cases and are looking forward to doing that in other communities. I think we can go to the next slide. These resolutions are extremely simple. These are not 1,000-page laws like our environmental bond bill that's pending here in Massachusetts, or reforming Social Security or something like that. It's really just one paragraph. And it says here, the town of Brookline shall purchase and use products that are certified free of fluorinated chemical ingredients where such products are available in the marketplace and encourage its suppliers to develop organofluorine-free products that do not have ready substitutes, of which there are many. I mean, starting with, say, your, calculator or your phone or uh, 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 those all are likely to have organofluorine in there somewhere. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are on the call and are interested in trying to get your municipality to adopt one of these policies, you can visit our resource page there. And again, it's not specific to Massachusetts. It's applicable nationwide. You can go to that QR code as well. And even so, this what we're going to talk about next here. We're going to segue into implementing this, and just passing it sends a market signal that you're concerned about this, and it signals the manufacturers without even actually changing your purchasing behavior. But hopefully you will, and we're going to talk about categories where it's pretty easy, and then there are other cases where it might be more difficult, and you can work with your purchasing department or your large purchases of materials like your building department or DPW to talk about more. At least for the moment, more exotic materials like street paint or uh, uh, let's see, refrigerants or that kind of thing. There's a lot of other categories that are more difficult to address, but sort of set a long-term goal for reducing these exposures to protect your residents and your employees and your visitors to your municipal properties. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to my architectural colleagues here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Allison Nash. I'm with Sazaki Associates in Boston. For the peer school, we were the collaborating architects with MDS. I'll let Sarah introduce herself.
And I'm Sarah Lesher. I'm the Director of Interiors at MDS. Um, and, this project definitely pushed our knowledge a little bit forward. So we're really excited to share with you the results.
Early in the project, Sasaki served as a sustainability consultant to MDS and the rest of the design team. And so in that context, I just wanted to kind of paint a picture of the context of the project as it stands. Clint mentioned how municipalities like Brookline have a greater purchasing power than the average consumer. And I also want to highlight the importance of the architect and design community who's navigating this landscape every day, trying to figure out how to make sure products that we are specifying or choosing for our projects are also healthy. So what I've heard this figure several times, but I've I usually, as a rule of thumb, think of our role as architects and designers having about 40 to 50 times the purchasing power than the average consumer in what we're selecting. So when we ask for transparency of ingredients or we ask for PFAS free, that sends a very strong signal to the marketplace. And we've seen tremendous change over the last 5 years, even for that. And we're on the front line. We are making decisions on materials that are going to be in our buildings and in our environment for decades to come, sometimes hundreds of years. So we take this responsibility really seriously. And just to give you an idea of the amount of materials we are selecting, each building project, whether that be a renovation project or a new building like the Pierce School, there are literally thousands of products that we are selecting and even tens of thousands that are installed in the building. So it's a lot to keep track of. And at the Pierce School specifically, our focus was on the product categories, of these tens of thousands of things that get installed in a new building. We wanted to make sure that we were focused on the material choices that have the greatest impact on the future occupants and users of the building. That is the children and the teachers and the community members. So we really focused on things that people would interact with every day: ceilings, floors, finishes, those kinds of things. And we'll talk a little bit more about in detail. Sarah will go over in detail what those categories were. But I just wanted to, highlight for this audience here that this project is really the first that we've heard of nationally that is looking at PFAS specifically for a public school with state funding. So I wanted to highlight that we're kind of on the leading edge of this, but there is still a lot left to do. The work is not over. We also wanted to give a little context on what this means for a public project, because how we select things is a little bit different, and Sarah's going to talk about that a little.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. You will hear us reference this point throughout the presentation, that one of the requirements that added this other layer of complexity to this emerging market is that Massachusetts is one of the states that requires that we provide three equals in our design of public work, which means we must include a minimum of three named brands of material or a description that can be met by a minimum of three manufacturers, and also allow for an equal substitution by bidders. So this means equal not only in quality, durability, appearance, strength, and design, but also for us, for our design team, from a sustainability and material health perspective, making sure we define that and clearly documented what each material required, and that we had investigated enough to know that there were actually three equal products on the market that we could purchase.
I wanted to share an example of how, as an architect, how we're seeing state regulations, not just municipal bans, but how we're seeing state regulations rippling through. And this example is just applying to carpet. So there's a New York State bill that's going into effect this year that no carpet sold or offered for sale in the state shall contain or be treated with PFAS substance for any purpose. So that's a kind of an outright ban that there's zero tolerance, and that's a little. We'll see how that one actually legally pans out. Maine has had one that a lot of states are following, and they have kind of rolling ban regulations that are coming through. Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, California. And what this means is that as designers, we are seeing more and more regulations emerging on this topic. So it's really important that we, together as an industry, make sure that it's clear what certified PFAS-free means and what the tested levels are.
Okay, so today, as Clint mentioned, we're sharing our project for the town of Brookline, Massachusetts, the John R. Pierce School. This project is situated in the heart of Brookline next to the town hall and the library. It is a pre-K through 8 school and it houses approximately 780 students. And it is the oldest functioning school building in Brookline. We are renovating the 1855-1904 historic building, which is kind of on the right of the diagram you're seeing on your screen, and providing nearly 142,000 square feet of additions in place of the 1970s structure that was removed. The building is situated on a sloped site and has 3 main entrances connecting back to the community. Schedule-wise, we began programming and design in the summer of 2021. The construction documents were issued for bid in the fall of 2024, and we are currently under construction. That picture you saw on the slide as you entered the Zoom was taken a few weeks ago from one of the contractor's drones. So you can see we're well underway and we're set to complete in the fall of 2027. Okay, very quickly. Oh, I went too fast. That's what I do. Okay, very quickly, we wanted to share a few renderings of the project to help you visualize. These focus in on those 3 entrances, but also share some of the materiality you see in the lower left-hand corner, the bridge to the historic building, and the scale at street level. For the interior, you can see here that in addition to the material health aspects that we're going to talk about in a minute, the design focused on creating a series of connected spaces that were filled with light and natural materials.
We wanted to share with you all some of our early goal setting slides that we used in our public meetings. That material health was just one of the many goals for the project. And we're going to focus in on that one in the next slide, kind of our initial goal setting. So this is what we had presented to the school community, that as a target for this project, we were going to aim to avoid the chemical classes of concern for interior touchable surfaces. So anything that people coming into the school would interact with physically, permanently installed on the walls, floors. And we also wanted to take a look at our landscape materials. There's playgrounds and outdoor spaces that Sazaki was designing, our landscape architects and civil engineers were working on. And we wanted to make sure that whatever materials we were selecting for those exterior environments would avoid PFAS if possible. And then we also wanted to balance in there, as we were looking at material health, the carbon dioxide or carbon emissions of the materials as well, not just the health.
Okay, so now we're going to dig in a little bit more. As we began construction documents, Brookline, as Clint mentioned, was engaged in very important work that was shared earlier. And because of this commitment that Brookline had to eliminating PFAS and a relationship that the PFAS committee had with the Harvard Office for Sustainability, a connection was made and a partnership was established with the design team to more formally pursue this goal in the Pierce School project. You can see on the right there a little bit of background. Harvard has developed a system for vetting materials over the last decade called the Harvard Healthier Building Academy, and it's based on the research their schools and faculty have been pursuing. Their focus started with just carpet in 2016 and has expanded to the 14 categories you see there in the bottom right, that they have vetted products that have eliminated the 3 chemical classes listed, and in some cases more, and they prioritize using these items on their list in all of their projects. In this presentation, we will be referring to products selected as optimized, and for us that means that these are the best in class or best available for this project, meaning heavy use of a public school, a long lifespan, and the 3 equals we were mentioning. In some cases, it does not mean that the complete chemical class avoidance goal was met, and we'll share a little bit more detail about that in a moment. In partnership with Harvard's researchers, we made great progress. As I mentioned, we were well into design when the partnership began in the late spring of 2024, after 60% construction documents were already submitted. We began by reviewing how the product list that Harvard had vetted could be applied or used as a filter for the materials already included in the design and the budget. The 14 original categories were this filter and a starting point. Harvard's partnership with our design team was the earliest and most integrated that they had worked with a design team on a Massachusetts public school to date, and with the focus of addressing the most challenging piece, meeting the state's requirements around 3 equal products across the goal categories. It was pretty well known and understood that we could likely get 1 option in all these categories, maybe 2, but to be able to achieve 3 equals without lowering the bar was something we weren't sure we could achieve. This slide represents the results of that research process with the depth of research and manufacturer engagement that was undertaken. The chart on the right side of the slide that is very hard to see is just snipped in to give you a sense of what was included in our specifications as a checkpoint for our bidders, tracking requirements for VOC emissions, testing, material transparency, and the chemical class avoidance we've been talking about. This next slide, however, is much more legible, hopefully, for everyone, and focuses really only on the chemical class avoidance. To orient you, the hot pink column is PFAS, orange is flame retardants, and yellow is antimicrobials. We are really proud to say that the highest volume of materials within the building fall under resilient floors, row 4, which either linoleum or rubber was used, acoustic ceiling tiles, which is row 6 on the chart, in all classrooms and corridors. Oh, sorry guys. And row 11, I think, which is the wall paint. Paint is a category that the advocacy that the researchers are doing is pushing the manufacturers forward in their transparency documentation. This being the first public project to have 3 commercial grade equals that had documentation showing they met these stringent chemical avoidance requirements. One last piece on this slide, the green rows and the green box in the left highlights where we expanded beyond the first 14 original categories. These rows may have had at least 1 product that was meeting higher requirements, but we had to set our bar a little lower and went for the best available to achieve the 3 equals. Or, for example, with blackout shades, we were able to confirm that that product was free of flame retardants, PVC, and phthalates, but it didn't have material transparency documentation to confirm it was PFAS free. But we're advocating for that testing now. Other categories achieve transparency or VOC testing across all equals, but more select chemical avoidance. You can also see that we have been able to add 3 exterior categories, which Allison will expand on a little bit later in the presentation. The accomplishments to have identified 3 optimized equal products for all of those categories is an achievement we're super proud of. The work of the researchers also prompted manufacturers to continue to develop their ingredient disclosures more formally, as this is how we can continue to target issues and make progress. But with any of these large projects, as Allison was mentioning earlier, we come across some specialized materials that don't face the same market pressures or demand to improve their material content or transparency. And it's our jobs to ask for this. For example, on our project, gym wall pads, curved theater acoustic ceiling panels, and a couple other things that just aren't going through the same process yet, but we ask the question and push the manufacturers. As it's the space where the students will spend the majority of the day, our success within the classroom was most important. Looking at the classroom materials, again, referencing back to the flooring, the ceilings, the paint, the roller shades, they all included 3 equal specifications that met the Harvard Healthier Building Academy standards and are PFAS-free, antimicrobial-free, and flame retardant-free. Cabinetry and countertops are a category where the advocacy continues. That's why we have it in the slightly darker purple here. Selections were made based on a number of decision points, which is kind of our whole design process throughout the project. There'll be plastic laminate cabinets with either plastic laminate or solid surface countertops. These are materials that are selected for durability and cost reasons and are widely used. Kate's work is a category where we're establishing transparency, so kind of the main first step, but also working to improve the chemical avoidance. And as part of this project, we worked with Harvard to identify the best available manufacturers' products and to optimize these categories as well and get to those three equals. And one last thing I wanted to share for the interior of the building is regarding the drinking water. Although generally the water source for this school is not problematic, thankfully, our drinking fountains throughout are fitted with separate filtration, which in addition to the PFAS addresses lead, bacteria, chlorine, and microplastics. This is something that should be considered in all buildings and projects as we move forward. And I will now pass it to Allison to talk a little bit more about the exterior.
So as Sarah mentioned, we entered this relationship with Harvard about a 50% CD. So at that construction document. So at that stage in the project, the building form, the materials all had been selected and detailed in the construction documents at least once. So we were happy to say that a lot of the materials that we already had in the project didn't have extra PFAS or sealants or things on top of them. We use predominantly natural materials for over 75% of the facade, including zinc, brick, stone, and slate. Next, please. However, when we started looking critically at other elements of the material, we have a lot of dissimilar metals that we were all planning on painting the same finish so that there'd be a unified urban expression to the building. We didn't want anything to be a different color or a different finish, so it wouldn't look like a mistake or that this building wasn't of the quality that it is. So when we started looking at the curtain wall finish, we realized, oh, wow, well, the paint that is predominantly used on curtain wall that gives it that metallic sheen or color is has PFAS in it. And so we had a difficult choice to make. Do we kind of keep that exterior finish how it is, or do our kind of what are our choices? So our solution to this, so that we didn't end up with mismatched colors on the exterior, was to do what's called a split finish. So on the interior side of the curtain wall, where people will interact with it mostly, it does have an anodized finish, which is a PFAS-free finish. And on the exterior, on the metalwork that's all over the building, that would have the PVDF finish. So this was a good lesson for us. We've thought about curtain wall finish very differently going forward. Also in the playground areas, we had the assistance of Harvard to really look at additional, ask for additional transparency documentation for playground structures that weren't custom, that were from catalogs. And so with Harvard's assistance, we were able to ensure that even though, we're using natural materials, that these Earthscapes and Copan companies did have disclosures about PVC, PFAS free. And then the play surface as well underneath, we ensured that we had to, make sure that that was absent of tire-derived crumb rubber to make sure that that was meeting our toxicity requirements also. Next, please. So in conclusion, we wanted to just bring it home to everyone here that for this project, it was really the partnership with Brookline and that emerging legislation that really pushed us in that relationship with Harvard to go as far as we did. And we had a lot of tough choices to make, but by making sure we were prioritizing health, I think we're going to look at a good outcome for the project. And it's important to note that allowing time for research and for communication of findings is really important for this, and that they're remain optimistic. There's always something more to do. So I think, and we can open it up to any questions at this point. Thank you for listening.